Welcome, everybody, to the Philosophers Corner Podcast. I hope you're having an incredible day, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're having today with the incredible Andile Dube. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
It's so amazing to have you here. I just want to bring our audience into the world that we are in right now. Thomas and I spoke about, I think it was in episode 2, that we have a vision of taking this podcast outdoors. And we were very lucky that Andile is actually close by and we could make this dream a reality. So I want to take an opportunity to also bring you along and for you to see the environment that we're in. And if we are looking out into space, we're not just looking aimlessly at a wall or something, but just taking the nature in that is surrounding us right now. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation.
Yeah. Firstly, you guys chose an amazing spot. It's a very scenic view. It's amazing view for the mountains and every other thing. I'm enjoying the space. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me as well.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out, how do I introduce Andile Dube? Andile is an entrepreneur. He is the creative director and co-founder of the Young Hustlers Initiative, which I think is so incredible, and we'll definitely hear a little bit more about it as our conversation goes. But you're also a father, you are a partner, you are a amateur athlete, you're a student, you are an educator, you are a creative, and I'm sure those are just a small number of the many identities that you wear. So can you tell us a little bit more about who Andile is?
Like you have rightfully said, Andile is a person of many faces, many identities, and I don't think a person can be one thing.
Yeah.
And we bring out different parts of ourselves to different people depending on the surrounding and the environment and everything else. So Andile in as myself, I'm all these things that you've highlighted and even more beyond those things, because those things are part of me. Those things make up the person that I am. And we cannot separate those things from me being Andile.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I was really interested in tapping into and hearing your thoughts on is your journey towards becoming an entrepreneurial facilitator, coach, educator. In preparation for this episode, I was looking up what the unemployment statistics are in South Africa at the moment. We both are South African. And for those of you who don't know, we are currently, I think in the fourth quarter, we were sitting with a total unemployment rate of 31%.
That's hectic.
With a youth unemployment rate of 46%. And I mean, you can look at many sort of global reports and sort of indices, and South Africa always is on the sort of the higher end of the spectrum in terms of what our unemployment rate is. So can you tell us a little bit about what was the pull of entrepreneurship, both as a practice, but also as something that you want to teach, you want to impart, wisdom onto young people? What sort of motivated that?
So I'll tell you a story that I've told very few people about. And at some point in my life, I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw South Africa burning. And so I saw South Africa burning, and I woke up and I'm agitated, and I'm like, what is happening? Like, why is this? Why South Africa is burning? And it's like, it was chaos on the streets, everything. And it got me thinking that there would come a point in life, if we don't take care of the bottom of the pyramid, that there will come a point where they will start eating everyone.
Yeah.
And so my then initial thoughts were, how do we change that narrative? How do we make things different? What does that look like if we were to change it? And I started thinking about what avenues to use to make that happen, to make that change. And one of them was entrepreneurship. And I fell into entrepreneurship. And I thought entrepreneurship could be a useful tool that could help young people to escape things such as poverty and every other thing. Because education is one of the tools, but education can only go so far. Because we have this thing where from a young age, I was taught that if you are educated, you get to this, you go to school, then you go to varsity, and there's this promised land of jobs that comes after.
Yeah.
So I'm of that generation of that narrative, but it's not happening like that.
Yeah.
And it is not happening like that. So then what is the issue? How do we change this? And I got into the entrepreneurship thing, and I said, I wanted to change the narrative, get young people to start thinking about creating these jobs, creating employment for themselves, being empowered, so that if they decide to pursue their careers, they can pursue a job if they want to. But if they don't want to, they can always start their own business or create their own job. So that was the thinking behind it. Yeah.
That is so, I mean, your dream, I thought for a second you were talking about like you had a dream for like, a better future. Not necessarily you actually had a dream of the country, if you know what I mean. And I totally, we can see the reality of that with like the inordinate levels of violence that we see in our society, and so many young people being exposed to that, and the desperation that comes from
100%
not having access to a means of making an income
100%.
And supporting your life,
100%.
essentially. So another thing that I was thinking about is, I know that you are at the moment quite interested in how to integrate stronger entrepreneurial focus into the economic management sciences curriculum in South Africa. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, and was sort of one of the sort of founding thoughts of this podcast, is to think about systems differently. And a lot of negative things can be said about the system of education that we live through and that currently exists. So I wanted to get a sense to hear from you, what motivated the decision to work within the system that currently exists, the EMS, Economic Management Sciences, schooling as a system, that why work through the system as opposed to
outside the system,
essentially.
I think if you want to make impact at scale, the only best thing to do impact at scale for me personally, I think, is within the system. The government, if, for example, the communities or the marginalized youth is what we are looking to target. And the biggest services of that marginalized youth is national curriculum, national government, EMS, and all those other things. So that's the biggest area that you would have to get into in order to make that kind of impact. There are organizations that are doing impact, but not at that scale. So if you can get into government and be able to work with government so as to get the stuff that you want to get to them and be able to do it that's the only way you can get it to scale. Because you'll hear people talking about we reaching 10,000 people, nonprofit organizations. Every year we do this thing. We have about almost 60 million people in South Africa. Half of them is youth. So if you're doing 10,000 a year, you're just tipping like a small scale of the iceberg. So in order, my thinking process is, in order for you to make meaningful impact, have to go into the schooling system. In schooling system, and in the schooling system, you have the EMS curriculum, as you rightfully said. EMS curriculum is dedicated to introducing entrepreneurship from a young age, in grade 7s to grade 9. And in introduction of this EMS in entrepreneurship, and my focus is thinking about how can we do it better? Because my initial thoughts are the current way is not working. So how can we do it better? So then it's going into the system and figuring out why is it not working? What is the biggest stumbling block or bottleneck in the system? And what can we do to fix it? And once we figure that out, then we can see what happens next. Because we just need to find the bottlenecks and see how do we fix it? How do we work with the system? Because no matter how much you can work on your side or on your privately as a project, you can never get to the scale in terms of education-wise as the National Department of Basic Education does.
That's very true. And I know that one of the strategies that you have used and continue to use is animation.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your animation journey? Andile, by the way, I feel like we need to link it somewhere, has created the most incredible little animated storybook for his daughter, which I feel like we also need to touch on, but we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Okay. So to tell you the honest truth, with comic books, I grew up watching cartoons when I was young. I loved cartoons. I absolutely loved cartoons. It was one of those things where I got from school, get home, watch cartoons, clean the house, and then get into cartoons. So it was one of those things. And then when I got to the point where we wanted to get to thinking about entrepreneurship, we said to ourselves, we need to meet young people where they are.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that, like, if you see our founding statement of what we want to do, we want to make entrepreneurship accessible, attractive, and affordable. So accessible meaning that there must not be any barriers in me learning about entrepreneurship. There must not be a thing where I have to pay someone. There must not be a barrier of connectivity if it's a tech solution. So all these things must not be there. Attractive, that means that I must be enticed to get into this thing and want to read or want to learn this thing. And when I started getting to it, I started exploring things like, I looked at edutainment, and I looked at things like Sesame Street. I was like, Sesame Street does this amazing stuff with this cartoon, Takalani Sesame in South Africa. And I'm thinking to myself, they're doing some amazing stuff. And I remember at some point, I used to watch this other program. I don't know if you used to watch it, Soul City.
Yes,
and it was teaching about AIDS, HIV, and so those things. And so it was, and I started looking at it and saying, it's forming part of this thing called edutainment. That's the category it calls. It's entertainment and it's education. So then how do you make entrepreneurship sticky in a way that it's entertaining, I'm learning, but I don't feel like I'm learning? So then the next thing was, what tool do we use? What platform or messaging tool we use? Do we use animation? Do we use comic books? Do we use, what do we use? If you go for animation, and animation is expensive to make. And if you're going to go for animation, you will have to use get the right platform because it's a tech-based, so you have to use some form of medium to disperse it. And animation is expensive on data and other things, so we can't use animation. So then it was comic books. When we went to comic books, the next question is, I know nothing about comic books. So I remember I used to go on Facebook. I used to message people on Facebook. I was like, I've got this great idea. I want to make an entrepreneurial comic book. I'm looking for an illustrator to illustrate this thing, but I don't have money. I don't have much money as well. And then it was that. And then I'll go to another person. I'm looking for a script writer to write the script for this comic. And again, I don't have much money. Eventually somebody said, I will help you to get to one page. Just like a comic strip, not a comic book, but a comic strip. I'll help you get to that point. But you have to pay me. But you have to pay me this much money. I'm like, okay, cool. I got to that point. Super excited. At that time, I'm like, yo, this is a great idea. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. It didn't work out so great. But we'll get into that a bit more as we go along. But that's how I got into comic books. It's just trial and error and just finding the right medium that works for the target audience.
I think one thing that I take away from the story that you just shared is that you just have to do it.
100%.
I think that's something that I'm still learning and sort of getting comfortable with. You just have to do it, and it doesn't have to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need to
100%.
pivot, you need to pivot, and that's okay. You're not starting it, and how it looks at the beginning of a journey it won't necessarily be the same. Hopefully won't be the same.
You must see the first comic books that we made. If you look at what we are making now and the first comic, it's terrible. Terrible. Like, even the word terrible is an understatement. The first logo that we made for our company, it is terrible. Like, I sometimes use it in my presentations when I'm showing my students at where we started.
Yeah.
And it shows, like, that's the beauty of documenting most things, or the journey, is that you can show and say, this is where we actually started. Don't look at us as we are doing animation, we're doing this, we're doing that, and it looks so amazing. And you think this is where we started. No, we started like many, many moons ago. We actually, before we even went to the comic books, we started with events. We were doing networking events because we want to get entrepreneurs into one room and talking and stuff like that. And it was always about, how do we get entrepreneurs talking? How do we get entrepreneurial? How do we get people to think entrepreneurially? Because I think at varsity level, at some point, I met this guy who was studying entrepreneurship at the time. And he's studying entrepreneurship. And I'm like, okay, so you're studying entrepreneurship. They're teaching you how to start businesses. I'm guessing that's what you should be taught. And he says, yeah, they're teaching all this. And he's saying, so what's your plan after this? After studying entrepreneurship? He says, I'm going to look for a job. I'm like, huh?
Obviously, this did not serve its purpose.
It actually didn't even sit well with me. I'm like, how is it that you go into an institution, you're paying school fees, you're paying however much, because I think it was like ridiculous amount of fees at that time, and you pay these fees, but yet they're teaching you how to go and look for a job, post the course. I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. And that's also the triggering moments where I was like, something has to be done with this thing. There's a problem here. What is it that we need to do to make things different? Yeah.
What do you have a history? I mean, do you have like any reference points in your life for people who started successful businesses? Because I know for myself, for instance, I've had the desire to start my own business for a long time, but I have no reference points. And I think when you don't have a reference point, it's very difficult to actually believe that you're going to have success at the end of the day, because you don't have somebody that's, that is an example of that journey. So how do you encourage young people to sort of, even if they don't have that reference point, make sure that they know that this path is possible?
So my only reference point for me when I was younger was, because I started this journey when I was way younger. I started in high school. I used to sell lollipops, believe it or not. You'll get a lollipops. I was that kid. I had a school bag, and in my school bag, I had these lollipops. I would sell to school, to my classmates, and I would make money. So my only reference point for me was, I wanted to make money. And my parents sometimes would send me to town, which is far, and then give me money for taxi fare. And I'll use that money and I'll buy my stock and stuff like that. And that's kind of how I started. And it was always been that I just wanted to make money. And that it did the lollipops thing, then went on to sell this other chocolate things, because I saw they are small packets, but you can sell it for much more than the lollipops. And then I went to those chocolates, and my brother and I started tinkering with other things. It was just, how do we make money? How do we make more money? That was the only thing that was. It was not a thing of I want to become, I don't know what,
a CEO.
It was nothing like that.
Yeah.
It was just like, we want to make money. We want to make money so we can buy, like, we look at the other kids in our class or in the school or wherever surroundings have nice stuff. We want to buy those things as well, because our parents couldn't buy. So then we need to make our own money so we can buy it for ourselves. So it was always just driven by that goal. And then post that, in varsity, or just after varsity, now you hear things about, you have to register a company, you make this thing formal, and now you go register the company, you have to make business cards, and now you have a business card that says CEO, founder, / And we fell in love, or I fell in love, or we got drunk with those things. We usually like, you want to be a CEO now, you want to be whatever. But it was always, back then it was driven by money. And over the years, it became driven by purpose. Everything that I've done so far for the past probably 10, 15 years has been just purpose-driven. And for me, that is the key why that has carried me throughout this whole interlooping journey of, what am I doing here? Why am I doing it? Yeah.
And what was that shift? What was that shift from money to purpose?
I think it was a thing of, you can never have enough money. There's no, like, you can never have enough. And it's a well that you can never fill. Also, it's one thing of, if I die tomorrow, what have I done? What difference have I made onto this world? Would people remember me? I think it's one of these movies. I think Troy or one of the movie. There's a line that says, "Will people remember you?" So, what would people remember you for? What do you want to leave behind? What is the thing that will drive you, like get you to not sleep at night, have sleepless nights? What is that thing? You have to have it. Like there has to be a strong kind of why that will be driving you every time, because the money will come later, much, much later. So what is it that will get you out of bed every morning, consistently grinding at this thing, waking up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning? What is that thing? So you have to have, and purpose is that thing. Money cannot be that thing because money comes after it. So then you need to have a purpose. So that's what the change came about, is I needed that purpose to carry me. Because there were times where you got to the point where you've got, like, things are going bad. You can't buy clothes for yourself, torn shoes, you got torn clothes. There's parts of the journey in entrepreneurship where you are sacrificing a lot. There has to be. So then, in you sacrificing a lot, what is it that is driving you?
Yeah.
It comes, and I feel like for me, entrepreneurship has become more of an spiritual journey of finding myself and saying, this is who you are, and you won't be pulled from side to side or this way, because you know who you are, you know your value, you know what you bring to the table, you know how you deliver that value, you know these things. And I think for me, if you strip entrepreneurship of every other thing, it comes down to just value. So entrepreneurship is about creating value. How do I give value? Who am I creating value for? How am I creating this value? How am I going to deliver that value? It just becomes that simple thing. Because if you think about it, if I'm selling a product, it has to be valuable for you to buy it.
Yeah.
If I'm selling a service, it has to be valuable for you to take it or use it. So I'm just creating value out of this thing, and we're calling it entrepreneurship. So it's just value creation.
I think one of the things that I love in what you said is sort of the thread of creativity that flows through, your entire story. But I think creativity has often been framed as, very narrowly, can you sing, can you dance, can you act? And if you can't do those things, then are you even creative, And I think Thomas and I spoke about that in episode 2, where we spoke about, like, it's not, creativity is so much more than that. Creativity is like, who built this path? That's also a creative thing.
Interesting thing on the creativity part, because one of my students in my class, I always use that example, is that on the creativity part, is that my thinking is that I always ask them this question, is that how many of you guys have lied before? And then people be like, I've lied. It has to be everyone, because very few people can say, I've never lied.
Exactly.
So then I say to them, that means you are creative.
And
it is, but what do you mean? Because think about a lie. It's creating nothing out of something. So you're making nothing and you're making it into something.
Yeah.
And that's the element of creativity. It's taking nothing and making it into something. So you're connecting dots, and you are taking this and this, and you're making, for you to fabricate a story, which is a lie, you are taking this, you're taking that, and you're making it into one thing. And that's creativity. You are being creative on how to deliver the story. Because sometimes, even when you deliver the story, you know very well that your target audience will not believe everything that you do unless you're emotive about it, and you are crying, emotional, and
you need to really sell it.
And you really sell it. But for you to know these things, that shows your creativity. You cannot now say you're not creative. You are definitely creative. Everyone is born. I think everyone has creativity in them. It's just what happens is that over the time, society tells us, and we boxes us into a box, puts us in a box, and we are getting to this box, and then they tell you are not creative in this manner. You are this, and then after you put in your box, and after that, you cannot come out of the box because now you are bombarded by this, that you are not creative. You're not creative. You're not creative. Eventually, you get to the point where you are an adult and you believe in, like, I'm actually not creative.
And on top of that, many of the jobs that we do reinforce that.
Exactly.
Because there's no room for creativity in so many of the roles and professions that many of us pursue.